Welcome to episode 4 of The Power of Visualization. Yesterday we introduced the idea of the inner screen of the mind, and I told a story about my son, Joseph, who has always wanted to be a filmmaker. And he had studied film and storylines and commercials and television shows all of his life. Thousands of hours he invested in watching this stuff. And what it did is it created a confidence in him about his ability to make stories. So much so that when I offered to him, a college education, he turned it down. He turned it down because he felt he would rather get busy doing the work and not spending all of his time in school. Now, I can understand that. I also come from the creative background. And when being a commercial artist and a designer by trade, I always drew well as a kid. When it came down to that time when I wanted to get higher education, I'd actually called around to certain ad agencies and design firms, and I asked them what sort of degree were they looking for, because I was considering going to a 2-year trade school called the Art Institute to just get a degree in visual communications, as opposed to the 4-year or 4-year in graduate work in design or whatever from a university. And all of the agencies and firms that I called said the same thing. They said, well, having an education is nice. It's good that you have a degree, but really what it comes down to is your portfolio. What work do you produce? Because someone can have degrees in something, but not be very proficient at what they do, right? So you can have degrees in art, but not be proficient at what you do. You can have a degree in runway modeling, but if you don't look beautiful, you're not going to be much of a model. It's not so much about that. It's about your portfolio. It's about what you produce. And so my son had the same outlook. He said, if I'm going to film school and I'm learning from people whose full-time occupation is teaching film, then I'm not learning from people who are in the business, that are in the trade. And I want to do the work. I want to do the creative work. So again, I understood that myself. So I didn't go to the 4-year university. I went to the 2-year trade school. So this was basically the same thing he was considering. So I said, well, I'll support you in that. So instead of spending money on college education, I spent money on cameras and that sort of thing. But here's the thing that was important at that time, is I wanted him still to become a better storyteller. And so he'd been studying film and television and video all of his life, but I wanted to get him to think even deeper. And to do that, I said, I want you to study what a novelist does. So I encouraged him to start reading novels like he used to watch film and television as a boy. The point is that a novelist does not have the luxury of the $150 million film budget to show things on a big screen. They don't have the money to hire actors, right? They don't have the money to go scout out locations and buy the cameras and get the visual effects done and do all of that. They don't have any of that. All they have is words. But what are they relying upon? They don't have the big screen that someone sees with their eyes, but the novelist relies upon different eyes looking at a different screen. A novelist has different eyes, or relies upon the fact that someone has different eyes watching a different screen. Something that's all happening inside. So whereas a filmmaker like a Steven Spielberg or something like that, they are paying hundreds of millions of dollars to create this visual thing that we see with our eyes, the novelist writes it and does it very simply with the eyes of the mind. So, for example, let's take Michael Crichton, who wrote Jurassic Park. That was a novel. Well, obviously, the novel captivated the mind of Steven Spielberg, who went on to do the visual. Now, I love the movie. It's a great movie. We want the movies. But Michael Crichton was relying upon the inner eyes. So the difference in cost between Michael Crichton's inner screen production and Steven Spielberg's inner screen production is hundreds of millions of dollars. You see it with your physical eye, what Spielberg made. You see it with your inner eye, what Crichton wrote. And that's just a few inches between your eyes and your mind. But the difference in those few inches is hundreds of millions of dollars. So I wanted my son to study that, so that the more he relied upon the active participation of the watcher, you know what I mean? To do more than just observe, but to see things with their minds, the better storyteller he would become. Because the shallow storyteller is going to rely upon pyrotechnics and visual effects and all of these things to make up for weak storytelling, for make up for weak scripts, to make up for weak character development. And so that was a light that really went off from my son, and he has and continues to actively pursue that. But I want you to consider that yourself, that you also are that visual storyteller. And the inner screen of your mind is what is real to you. That's what's real to you. More so than anything you see with your physical eyes, what you see with the inner screen, what you see on the inner screen of your own heart and mind with those inner eyes, that's where faith and belief resides. That's where doubt and unbelief resides. That's where true power gets released, because you will truly become what you believe. You will truly become what you see. So when we say things like, I'll believe it when I see it, you're absolutely right. You will believe what you see with your inner eyes. Just like when you see something with your physical eyes, you say, oh, wow, now I believe it. Same thing, even more powerful. You will believe whatever it is you see with your inner eyes, but not just in one item, not just one thing, in everything. And so that visual power of your mind is constantly showing the movie of your life, the past, and the movie of your life of the future. How are you telling that story? What is playing on the inner screen of your mind? Again, you are the storyteller. You are the novelist. You are the filmmaker. So let's use the power of that inner screen. You can project anything that you want on that inner screen. What are you projecting? Have you thought about it? Will you take a few moments today to think about it? Will you take a few moments today to practice it? Will you start to be more cognizant of what's happening on the inner screen of your mind? To learn to check yourself and stop playing a movie that shouldn't be playing, or learn to change the channel of your mind? Learn to use the remote on your own mind and change the channel of something that you don't want to watch? It's really simple to do. It's a challenge because of your negative habits, but the process is actually very simple. Can you dig that? I hope you can.